They say red is the color of passion, or danger. But for me, on that damp Tuesday morning in November, it was the color of the truth. I stood in front of my full-length mirror, smoothing the fabric down my hips. It was a striking dress. A deep, blood-red crimson silk that caught the light with every breath I took. It was elegant, tasteful in its cut, but loud in its existence. It was the kind of dress you wear to a gala, or a romantic anniversary dinner. It was definitely not the kind of dress you wear to a funeral. Especially not the funeral of your husband's mother. My husband, Daniel, was downstairs. I could hear his heavy footsteps pacing on the hardwood floor. He was nervous. He was grieving. And he had no idea what I was about to do. You might think I'm cruel. You might look at me, standing there applying lipstick that matched that defiant dress, and think I am a monster for disrespecting the dead. But before you judge me, you have to understand something. You have to understand that this wasn't just a fashion choice. It wasn't a tantrum. It was the closing argument in a trial that had lasted for 7 agonizing years. It was an answer to a question she asked me on the very first day of my marriage. To explain why I wore red to her funeral, I have to take you back to the day Evelyn wore black to my wedding. I remember the smell of that day perfectly. It was June, and the air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and expensive perfume. I was 26 years old, naive, and so deeply in love with Daniel that I felt like I was floating 2 inches off the ground. We had planned a garden wedding. Everything was going to be soft pastels, blush pinks, creams, baby blues. It was supposed to be light. It was supposed to be a celebration of a new beginning. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, had been difficult during the planning. That's the polite word for it. She had sighed loudly when I chose the flowers. She had wrinkled her nose at the menu tasting, pushing her plate away as if I had served her mud. But I told myself it was normal. Mothers have a hard time letting go of their sons, right? Everyone said that. Just be patient, my own mother had whispered to me. Kill her with kindness. I tried. I really did. But on the morning of the wedding, the kindness died. I was standing at the altar, waiting. The music had swelled, signaling the start of the ceremony. Daniel was squeezing my hand, his palm warm and reassuring. I looked out at the guests, smiling at my friends, my family. Then, the heavy oak doors at the back of the chapel opened for the final entrance before the ceremony officially began. It was Evelyn. A collective gasp rippled through the church. It wasn't a quiet gasp, it was a sharp, sucked-in breath from 100 people at once. Evelyn wasn't wearing the navy blue mother of the groom dress we had picked out together. She wasn't wearing silver or gold or beige. She was wearing black. And I don't mean a stylish, modern black cocktail dress. I mean heavy, Victorian mourning black. She wore a long-sleeved dress made of dense, light-absorbing velvet that seemed to swallow the sunshine in the room. She had a black hat with a small, netted veil that partially obscured her eyes. She looked like a widow walking behind a hearse. She walked down the aisle slowly, dabbing her dry eyes with a black lace handkerchief. The silence in the church was deafening. I felt my blood run cold. I looked at Daniel. His jaw had dropped. He looked pale, confused. "Mom," he whispered as she reached the front row. She didn't look at me. She didn't acknowledge the bride. She looked straight at her son, her eyes tragic and watery. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling just loud enough for the first 5 rows to hear. "I couldn't bring myself to wear colors. Not today." "Why?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Because," she sighed, "I am mourning. I am mourning the loss of the only man who ever truly loved me." She sat down, arranging her black skirts around her like a fortress. That was the moment. That was the first strike. In front of everyone we knew, she had declared that our marriage was not a gain, but a death. She had made herself the victim at my wedding. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stop the ceremony and demand she leave. But I looked at Daniel. He was mortified. He looked broken. I loved him too much to cause a scene. So, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I squeezed his hand. I said, I do. But as I promised to love and cherish him, I could feel her eyes on my back. Boring into me. A dark, heavy presence that promised me one thing: you will never be enough. I thought the wedding was the worst of it. I thought, surely, she had made her point and would back off. I was so wrong. The black dress wasn't the climax of her cruelty. It was just the opening ceremony. Life settled into what looked like a routine. We bought a nice house about 20 minutes away from her. I worked as a graphic designer, Daniel was an accountant. On the surface, we were the perfect young couple. But inside our home, Evelyn was like a gas leak, invisible, odorless, but slowly poisoning everything. She had a key to our house. Daniel had given it to her for emergencies, and I hadn't wanted to fight about it so early in our marriage. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was small. I came home from work, tired, dropping my bag on the sofa. I walked into the kitchen to start dinner, and I stopped. My spice rack was different. I organized my spices alphabetically. It's a little quirk of mine. But now, they were arranged by color. The red spices were together, the greens, the browns. I frowned. Daniel? I called out. Did you touch the kitchen? No, honey, I've been in the study all day, he shouted back. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I walked into the living room. The throw pillows were different. The blue ones were on the gray chair, and the gray ones were on the sofa. I knew I hadn't left them like that. Then I saw the note on the kitchen counter. It was written on thick, cream-colored stationery in elegant cursive script. Dear Sarah, I popped in to drop off some mail for Daniel. I noticed the house was looking a bit chaotic, so I tidied up a few things for you. A cluttered home is a cluttered mind, dear. Try to keep up. Mom. I stared at the note. Chaotic? I had vacuumed that morning. The house was spotless. I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't about the cleaning. It was about the territory. She had come into my sanctuary when I wasn't there and left her mark. She was peeing on the corners of my life. When I showed Daniel, he laughed it off. He kissed my forehead and said, "She's just trying to help, babe. She's old-fashioned. She shows love by cleaning. Don't take it so personally. Don't take it personally." That became the soundtrack of my marriage. But how could I not take it personally when the help started to feel more like sabotage? It wasn't a war of loud explosions or screaming matches. If it had been, I might have stood a chance. I could have fought back against a shout. But you can't fight a whisper. You can't fight a helpful gesture without looking like an ungrateful brat. And Evelyn knew that. She was a master of the war of 1,000 paper cuts. A few months after the spice rack incident, I came home early from work. I had a migraine, the kind that starts behind your eyes and pulses like a strobe light. I just wanted to lie down in the dark. As soon as I unlocked the front door, the smell hit me. It wasn't the soft scent of my lavender candles. It was the sharp, chemical sting of bleach. Evelyn? I called out, shielding my eyes from the afternoon sun streaming into the hallway. She popped her head out of the laundry room. She was wearing an apron, my apron. Oh. Sarah. You're home early. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd help you catch up on the wash. Daniel mentioned you've been working late hours. My stomach dropped. I didn't ask you to do the laundry, Evelyn. Nonsense, she waved a hand. I'm a mother. I help. She stepped aside, revealing the pile of wet clothes on the counter. Lying on top was my favorite silk blouse. It was a deep navy blue, or it had been. Now, it was splotched with angry, white tie-dye burns where raw bleach had eaten the color away. I gasped, rushing forward to touch the ruined fabric. My blouse. Evelyn, this is silk. You can't use bleach on this. She brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. But there was something flat in her expression. A lack of genuine panic. Oh, dear. I must have mixed up the bottles. The labels on your cleaning products are so modern. It's hard to tell what's what. It says bleach in giant letters, I snapped, my headache spiking. She stiffened. There is no need to raise your voice, Sarah. It was an accident. It's just a shirt. I'll buy you another one from Target. That blouse was from a boutique in Paris. It cost $300. But it wasn't the money. It was the dismissal. It was the way she reduced my treasured possession to something disposable from a bargain bin. When Daniel came home that night, I was still upset. I showed him the blouse. I waited for him to be angry on my behalf. Instead, he sighed. A heavy, exhausted sigh that made me feel like a burden. Sarah, she was trying to help, he said, loosening his tie. She feels terrible. She called me crying, saying you yelled at her. I froze. I didn't yell. I was upset because she ruined my clothes. She's old, Sarah. Her eyesight isn't what it used to be. Can we please not make a federal case out of a laundry mistake? I'm tired. He walked past me into the kitchen, and I stood there, holding the ruined silk, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. She had gotten to him first. She had spun the narrative before I even had a chance to speak. I wasn't the victim of property damage. I was the mean daughter-in-law who yelled at a poor, helpful old woman. That was the pattern. Strike, then play the victim. Strike, then play the victim. Over the next 2 years, the strikes got deeper. It started affecting my reputation. At family barbecues, cousins I barely knew would look at me with pity or suspicion. I found out why during a Thanksgiving dinner at Aunt Linda's house. I was in the kitchen, helping clean up, when I overheard Evelyn talking to Daniel's cousin in the dining room. They didn't know I was just around the corner. Poor Daniel, Evelyn's voice drifted in, low and conspiratorial. He works so hard, and Sarah, well, she struggles, you know. Struggles with what? The cousin asked. Moods, Evelyn whispered. She's very unstable. Up and down. I think the stress of keeping a home is too much for her. I go over there to clean because if I didn't, they'd be living in squalor. But don't tell Daniel I told you. He's too proud to admit he made a mistake. I dropped the serving spoon I was holding. It clattered loudly against the ceramic tile. The voices in the dining room stopped instantly. When I walked out, shaking with rage, Evelyn was sipping her iced tea, looking cool as a cucumber. She smiled at me, a tight, thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Everything okay in there, dear? You're so clumsy lately. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But I saw the way the family was looking at me. They were watching to see if I would snap. If I yelled, I would prove her right. I would be the unstable wife with the moods. So, I swallowed the fire. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. I'm fine, Evelyn. Just slipped. I looked at Daniel across the room. He was watching football, oblivious. He didn't see the sharks circling. He didn't see that his mother was slowly, methodically painting me as a villain in his life story. But the breaking point, the moment I knew this wasn't just a difficult personality but pure malice, happened on our 3rd anniversary. We had been trying for a baby for a year with no luck. It was a sensitive, painful topic. Every month was a cycle of hope and crushing disappointment. Only Daniel and I knew. We hadn't told anyone. Or so I thought. I was cleaning out the guest room closet, looking for extra blankets, when I found a small, cardboard box tucked way in the back, behind some old winter coats. It was a box of Daniel's old things from college that Evelyn had dropped off months ago. Curious, I opened it. It was mostly old textbooks and photos. But at the bottom, there was a stack of letters. Recent letters. They were addressed to Daniel. From Evelyn. I knew I shouldn't read them. I knew it was an invasion of privacy. But the date on the top letter was from just last week. I unfolded the paper. My hand started to tremble as I read the neat, cursive script. My dearest Daniel. I know you are defending her, but you have to face reality. A woman who cannot keep a house often cannot keep a child. Perhaps it is God's mercy that she hasn't conceived yet. Do you really want to tie yourself permanently to someone so fragile? There is still time to reconsider. The lawyer I mentioned is very discreet. I stopped breathing. The room spun. She wasn't just being mean. She was actively lobbying for a divorce. She was using our infertility, our deepest, most private pain, as a weapon to convince him to leave me. And the worst part? Daniel hadn't thrown the letter away. He had kept it. I sat on the floor of the guest room, clutching that letter, feeling a cold realization wash over me. This wasn't a marriage of 2 people. It was a marriage of 3. And the 3rd person was trying to kill it. I heard the front door open downstairs. Daniel was home. I stood up, wiping the tears from my face. I wasn't going to cry. Not anymore. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I needed to know whose side he was really on. I walked down the stairs, the paper feeling heavy as lead in my pocket. Daniel was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. He looked up, smiling tiredly when he saw me. Hey! Did you find those blankets? I didn't answer. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out the letter, and placed it gently on the granite island between us. The color drained from his face so fast it was like someone had pulled a plug. He didn't even have to look at the handwriting to know what it was. He knew. Sarah, he started, his voice cracking. I can explain. She wants you to divorce me, I said, my voice dangerously calm. She's suggesting lawyers. She's mocking the fact that we can't have a baby. And you kept it. I didn't keep it because I agree with her. He slammed his glass down, water sloshing over the rim. I kept it because I didn't know how to destroy it. It felt like evidence. I don't know. Evidence of what, Daniel? That your mother hates me? We know that. The evidence I see here is that you're letting her whisper poison in your ear and you're not stopping her. He slumped against the counter, putting his head in his hands. I did stop her, Sarah. I told her to stop sending them. That's why there haven't been any new ones for a week. I told her that if she spoke about our fertility again, I wouldn't talk to her for a month. I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't a villain. He was a battered child in a grown man's body. He had spent 30 years being trained to fear her, to crave her approval. But understanding his trauma didn't mean I had to accept his complicity. That's not enough, I said, my voice trembling. I can't live like this, Daniel. I can't live in a marriage with 3 people. You have to choose. You can be her dutiful son, or you can be my husband. But you can't be both. Not anymore. We cried that night. We yelled. We slept in separate rooms for the first time. But in the morning, Daniel called Evelyn. I listened from the other room as he told her, his voice shaking but firm, that she was not welcome in our home until she could respect his wife. For 6 months, there was silence. Peace. It was the happiest time of our marriage. We actually started to breathe again. And then, the call came. It was a Tuesday. Daniel answered the phone, and I watched his face crumble. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor gave her 3 months. And just like that, the anger had to be shelved. You can't fight a dying woman. The villain had become the victim, and society has a script for that. The script says you must be gracious. You must be forgiving. You must rally around the family. So, I did. I drove her to chemotherapy when Daniel was working. I cooked her soups that she ate without saying thank you. I cleaned her house, the same house where she had written letters praying for my divorce. I sat by her bedside while she withered away, her skin turning papery and yellow. I thought, foolishly, that maybe the proximity to death would soften her. I thought maybe, in her final moments, she would look at me and see that I was the one holding her hand while everyone else was too scared to look at her. I was wrong. 2 days before she died, I was adjusting her pillows. She was weak, barely able to lift her head. She motioned for me to come closer. I leaned in, expecting a request for water. You won, she rasped, her voice dry as dead leaves. I pulled back slightly. Excuse me? Her eyes, clouded with medication but still sharp with malice, locked onto mine. You think you won? You think, because I'm dying, you get him all to yourself. Evelyn, please. Save your energy. He will never, truly be yours, she wheezed. I raised him. I molded him. You're just the intermission. She closed her eyes, exhausted by her own hate. She died 48 hours later. The grief in the house was heavy, but complex. Daniel was devastated. He was mourning the mother he wanted, not the one he had. I was mourning the relationship we never got to have. The day after she passed, we went to her house to sort through the immediate paperwork for the funeral home. Daniel was in the bedroom, looking for a suit for the burial. I was in her study, looking for the life insurance policy. I opened the top drawer of her mahogany desk. It was obsessively organized, just like her life. Files, labeled and color-coded. Right in the center of the desk, sitting on top of the blotter, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It had only one word written on it, Daniel. But beneath that, in smaller print, to be read only after I am in the ground. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't open it. It wasn't for me. But I remembered the last letter. I remembered the intermission. I didn't open the envelope itself. But sitting next to it was a notepad. And on the notepad was the impression of what she had written. She had pressed down hard with her pen. I grabbed a pencil from the cup and lightly shaded over the indentations. The words appeared in white against the graphite gray. It wasn't a letter of love. It was a list of instructions. 1. Daniel to inherit the estate, solely. 2. The ruby ring goes to cousin Melissa, not Sarah. 3. Funeral attire, traditional black. I want Sarah to sit in the second row, behind the immediate family. She is not blood. And then, the final line. The line that stopped my heart. Make sure she knows she was never welcome. Even in death, I do not want her standing next to my son. She wanted to humiliate me one last time. From the grave. She wanted me to sit in the second row at my own husband's mother's funeral, like a distant acquaintance. She wanted to dictate my place in Daniel's life forever. I stared at the paper. I felt a heat rising in my chest, hotter than the shame she had made me feel at my wedding. Hotter than the anger I had swallowed for 7 years. She had worn black to my wedding to mourn a living union. She wanted to cast a shadow over my marriage even as she rot in the ground. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not with fear, but with clarity. Traditional black, she had requested. I set the pencil down. I wasn't going to sit in the second row. And I certainly wasn't going to wear black. If she wanted to make a statement about mourning, I would make a statement about life. She had tried to erase me. So, I was going to make sure that on the day she left this earth, I was the only thing anyone could see. I walked out of the study and found Daniel. Did you find the policy? He asked, eyes red and swollen. Yes, I lied. I found everything I needed. I drove straight to the mall. I didn't go to the department store section with the modest, dark suits. I went to the designer wing. And there it was. In the window. Red. I zipped the dress. The sound was loud in the quiet bedroom, like a zipper closing a body bag. I turned around. Daniel was standing in the doorway, holding his black tie. He stopped dead. His eyes scanned me from the hem of the crimson skirt up to my face. He didn't look angry at first, he looked confused. Like he was hallucinating. Sarah, he whispered. What are you doing? I'm getting ready, Daniel, I said, my voice steady. I picked up my clutch. It was black, the only concession to the occasion. You can't wear that, he said, stepping into the room. His voice rose a little, tinged with panic. We are going to a funeral. My mother's funeral. Everyone will be in black. I know, I said. Just like everyone was in pastels at our wedding. Except her. He froze. The memory hit him. I saw it land behind his eyes. That was 7 years ago, he pleaded, running a hand through his hair. Sarah, please. Not today. I can't deal with this today. People will talk. They'll say you're crazy. They'll say you're disrespecting her. I walked over to him. I placed my hands on his shoulders. The red silk rustled. Daniel, listen to me. For 7 years, I have made myself small to make her feel big. I have swallowed every insult. I have let her treat me like a stranger in my own marriage. Today is the last day she gets to have an opinion on us. I am your wife. I am not a guest. And I am not going to hide in the shadows. He looked at me, really looked at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He realized that this wasn't a negotiation. If he told me to change, I wouldn't change the dress, I would leave the marriage. He let out a long, ragged breath. He looked defeated, but he nodded. Okay. Just stay close to me. Please. Always, I promised. The drive to the church was silent. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I watched the world pass by through the window, feeling the adrenaline humming in my veins. I wasn't doing this to be petty. I was doing this to reclaim my dignity. I was rewriting the ending of a story she thought she had finished. When we pulled up to the church, the parking lot was a sea of black cars and gray skies. People were already gathering on the steps, huddled in dark coats, speaking in hushed tones. I opened the car door. The moment my red heels hit the pavement, heads turned. It started as a ripple. The people closest to us stopped talking. They nudged their neighbors. The silence spread outward like a wave until the entire courtyard was staring. I didn't look down. I stood up straight, shoulders back, chin high. The wind caught the skirt of my dress, billowing the red fabric around me like a flag. I took Daniel's arm. He was tense, his muscles hard as stone, but he didn't pull away. We walked up the steps together. At the entrance to the sanctuary, Aunt Linda, Evelyn's sister and loyal soldier, was handing out programs. She looked up, smiling sadly at Daniel, and then her eyes slid to me. Her face went slack. The program slipped from her hand and scattered on the floor. "Sarah," she gasped. "Have you lost your mind?" "Hello, Linda," I said politely. "I'm here to support my husband." She stepped in front of us, blocking the doorway. Her face twisted into a scowl that looked exactly like Evelyn's. "You cannot go in there like that. It's obscene." And besides, she lowered her voice to a hiss. Evelyn left instructions. She wanted the family in the front row. You are to sit in the second row. With the friends and neighbors." There it was. The final command. "She is not blood." I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to apologize or try to smooth things over. I squeezed his arm, silencing him. "Linda," I said, my voice carrying over the quiet crowd. "I am his wife. His family is my family. And I don't take seating assignments from the dead." I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't push her, but I moved forward with enough authority that she instinctively stepped back. We walked into the sanctuary. If the outside was quiet, the inside was a tomb. The organ music was soft and mournful. The air smelled of lilies and old wood. As we walked down the center aisle, the sound of my heels clicking on the stone floor echoed. Click. 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 Every head turned. Every eye widened. I could hear the whispers starting. "Is that Sarah? Why is she wearing red? Oh my God, the disrespect." I felt the heat of their judgment. It burned my skin. But I kept walking. I kept my eyes fixed on the casket at the front of the room. It was closed, covered in a spray of white roses. We reached the front. The first pew was empty, reserved for the son and his family. I felt a moment of hesitation. This was it. The point of no return. If I sat there, in that red dress, front and center, I was defying her final wish in the most public way possible. I looked at the casket. I thought about the bleach on my silk blouse. I thought about the letter in the guest room. I thought about intermission. I took a deep breath. I guided Daniel into the front pew. And I sat down right next to him. My red dress spilled over the dark wood of the bench. It was a beacon. A fire in a dark room. The service began. The priest spoke about Evelyn's kindness, her generosity, her love for her family. He spoke about a woman I didn't know. A woman who didn't exist. I sat stoically, holding Daniel's hand. I could feel Aunt Linda's eyes boring into the back of my skull from the row behind us. Then, it was time for the eulogies. Daniel stood up. He squeezed my hand one last time and walked to the podium. He looked broken. He spoke about his childhood, about the good memories. He cried. I watched him with love. He was a good man. A good son. When he finished, he stepped down. The priest returned to the microphone. Is there anyone else who would like to share a memory of Evelyn? Usually, this is the part where people sit in awkward silence. But before the silence could settle, Aunt Linda stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She stood right there, in the second row, directly behind me. I have something to say, she announced, her voice trembling with anger. I want to say that my sister was a woman of tradition. She believed in respect. And I think it is a tragedy, that on her final day, she is being mocked by someone who never understood her. The room went deadly silent. She was talking about me. She was doing it. She was attacking me in the middle of the funeral. Evelyn told me, Linda continued, her voice rising, that she feared this day. She feared that some people would try to make this about themselves. She pointed a shaking finger at the back of my head. I felt Daniel freeze next to me. I slowly turned around in my seat. I looked Linda in the eye. Are you finished, Linda? I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the church, it was crystal clear. No, I am not finished, she snapped. You have no business sitting there. You have no business wearing that whore's dress in the house of God. You hated her. Everyone knows it. Gasps erupted around the room. I stood up. The red dress flowed around me. I towered over Linda, who was still crouching in the pew. I didn't hate her, Linda, I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room. I pitied her. Pitied her? Linda scoffed. Yes, I said. And since you brought up her wishes, and her traditions, perhaps we should share all of them. I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out the paper. The paper where I had shaded over her final instructions. The paper crinkled in the silence. It was a small sound, but it echoed like a gunshot. You talk about respect, Linda, I said, my voice steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. You talk about tradition. But we all know Evelyn's traditions were selective. I held the paper up. The white letters shone against the gray pencil shading, ghostly and undeniable. I found this on her desk yesterday, I continued, addressing the room, not just Linda. I saw faces craning their necks, neighbors, old friends, distant cousins. It was her final request. Hidden. Written in invisible pressure on a notepad because she didn't have the courage to write it in ink where her son might see it. That's a lie. Linda hissed, lunging forward slightly. Give that to me. Daniel stood up. He moved faster than I expected. He stepped between me and his aunt, his hand raised. Let her speak, Daniel said. His voice was low, guttural. It wasn't a request. I looked at Daniel, grateful, then back at the crowd. She wrote, make sure Sarah sits in the second row. She is not blood. Make sure she knows she was never welcome. A ripple of murmurs went through the pews. Shock. Discomfort. I lowered the paper. 7 years ago, Evelyn walked into this very church, down that aisle, wearing a black mourning gown to my wedding. She told everyone within earshot that she was mourning the loss of her son. She treated the happiest day of my life like a funeral. I paused, letting that memory settle over them. I saw recognition in the eyes of the older guests. They remembered. They had been there. They had whispered about it then, too. She wore black to my beginning, I said, my voice breaking just a little, letting the raw hurt show through the anger. She tried to bury my marriage before it even started. So yes, today I am wearing red. I smoothed the silk of my skirt. I am wearing red because I am still here. I am wearing red because my marriage survived her attempts to kill it. I am wearing red because I will not mourn a woman who spent 7 years trying to erase me. I am here out of respect for my husband. But I will not pretend that I lost a mother. I lost a bully. I turned to Linda. She was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She had no defense. The truth was too specific, too consistent with the Evelyn they all secretly knew. You can have your second row, Linda, I said softly. But I'm sitting with my husband. I sat back down. For a long, agonizing moment, nobody moved. The air in the church was electric. It felt like a storm had just broken overhead. Then, slowly, Daniel sat down next to me. He didn't look at the casket. He didn't look at Linda. He reached over, took my hand, and interlaced our fingers. He squeezed tight, tighter than he ever had. It was a squeeze that said, I believe you. I am with you. Linda stood there for a second longer, looking around for support. But she found none. The congregation was looking at their laps, or at the floor. The spell of the grieving sister was broken. She huffed, adjusted her jacket, and sank back into her seat, defeated. The priest, a young man who looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else on earth, cleared his throat nervously. Let us pray, he stammered. The rest of the service was a blur. I felt the eyes on me, but the feeling had changed. It wasn't judgment anymore. It was curiosity. Maybe even a little awe. When the service ended, we had to walk back down the aisle. This is the part one was dreading. The recessional. Following the casket out. Daniel stood up and offered me his arm. Ready? He whispered. Ready? I breathed. We walked behind the pallbearers. The red dress swayed with every step. As we passed the rows of guests, I looked at them. I didn't look down. And I saw it. I saw a woman in the fourth row, Evelyn's neighbor, Mrs. Gable. She caught my eye. And she gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. A subtle chin lift. Then I saw Daniel's cousin, the one Evelyn had gossiped to at Thanksgiving. She looked at me, then looked at the red dress, and the corner of her mouth twitched upward. They knew. They had all known Evelyn's nature. They had just been too polite to challenge it. By breaking the rules, by wearing the scandalous color, I hadn't ostracized myself. I had popped the balloon. I had said the quiet part out loud. We stepped out into the gray afternoon. The rain had started to fall, a light drizzle that misted the air. We stood by the hearse as the casket was loaded. Aunt Linda pushed past us, refusing to make eye contact, clutching her purse like a weapon. She got into her car and slammed the door. Daniel turned to me. The rain was dampening his hair, spotting his black suit. He reached out and touched my cheek. I didn't know, he said softly. About the note. I didn't know that she was still doing it. Even at the end. She couldn't help it, I said, feeling the anger drain away, leaving only exhaustion. It was who she was. I'm sorry, he said. And this time, he wasn't apologizing for her. He was apologizing for himself. I should have protected you better. I should have seen it. You see it now, I said. I do, he nodded. He looked at the red dress, bright and defiant against the gray world. You look beautiful, by the way. I smiled, a weak, tired smile. Thank you. The burial was brief. I stood by the grave, the red splash in a sea of black umbrellas. When they lowered her into the ground, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. The letters, the whispers, the bleach, the mind games. It was all in the ground. As people started to leave, walking back to their cars, a few of them stopped. Not to scold me, but to speak to me. I always liked red, an old aunt murmured as she patted my arm. Takes courage to wear it. She was a complicated woman, another relative said, shaking Daniel's hand but looking at me with new respect. I realized then that the public consequence wasn't my shame. It was the exposure of the truth. By trying to humiliate me from the grave, Evelyn had only succeeded in freeing me. We drove home in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. The tension that had lived in our car, in our house, in our marriage for 7 years was gone. But when we got home, there was one last thing to do. I walked into the kitchen. The house was quiet. What do you want to do for dinner? Daniel asked, loosening his tie. I'm not hungry yet, I said. I'm going to change. I walked upstairs to our bedroom. I unzipped the red dress and let it pull on the floor. I looked at it for a long moment. It had served its purpose. It was my armor, my war paint. But the war was over. I put on sweatpants and a t-shirt. I felt like myself again. Just Sarah. Not the daughter-in-law. Not the intermission. Just Sarah. I went into the guest room, the room where I had found the letters. The room that had always felt like a storage unit for Evelyn's ghost. I started pulling things out of the closet. The old boxes she had sent over. The gifts she had given us that were really just insults in disguise, the self-help books on being a better wife, the ugly art she insisted we hang. Sarah? Daniel appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? I turned to him, holding a hideous ceramic vase she had given me for my birthday, the one she said was perfect for my simple taste. I'm cleaning house, Daniel, I said. For real this time. He looked at the pile of junk. Then he looked at me. He walked over, picked up a box of old photos, the one she had used to try and make him nostalgic for a life before me. I'll get the trash bags, he said. Looking back, I realized that for 7 years, I thought silence was my shield. I thought that if I just stayed quiet, if I just took the high road, eventually the bullying would stop. But silence doesn't stop a bully, it only gives them permission to speak louder. That red dress wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a boundary. It was the moment I decided that my dignity was worth more than a polite lie. Evelyn wanted to be the main character of my marriage until her very last breath, and even beyond it. But by wearing red, I reminded everyone, including myself, that her scene had ended, and mine was still being written. Daniel and I are healing. It's a slow process, unlearning years of manipulation, but our home finally feels like our home. We don't walk on eggshells anymore. We walk on solid ground. Now, I want to hear from you. I know some people in that church thought I was heartless. They thought I should have swallowed my pride one last time for the sake of tradition. But I believe there is a difference between respecting the dead and enabling their cruelty. So, tell me in the comments, did I go too far? Would you have sat in the second row and worn black just to keep the peace, or would you have worn red to reclaim your place? I read every single comment, and I'm curious to know what you would do. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to fight to be seen in your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share more stories like this one. Thank you for listening.